So we're going to repeat something similar for B. B says to find D, subtract 2C. So we're talking about D and C having to be subtracted. Don't mind that 2 yet, but the subtraction sign is important. So let us see if D and C can be subtracted to each other. D is a 2 by 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. C is a 1, 2, 1, 2. So D and both C and D are 2 by 2s. So yes, subtraction can happen. Okay, so let's write this down. Put your bracket. So let's go to put the bracket first. It look like go inside the bracket and you look for a 2 by 2 matrix. Here it is. Bam. Minus a 2. Okay, you have to go back each side and then put the minus a 2. And then go back to equations, matrices, and brackets. Oh no, just copy this 2 by 2. We have a 2 by 2 right there. Control C, Control V. All right. So D now, let's minimize that a little bit. Hope it's not too small. I'll wind it after. D is 5, 5, 2, and 0, negative 6. Minus 2C. C is 1, 3, negative 5, and 8. Right, so let's increase that. And let us check out what we are going to be doing there. I can put a little separation between those two. So a whiteboard for itself alone. Okay. Now, pause a little bit to analyze what is going on. All right. Are we recording? Yes, we are. Now, this is D minus 2C. Bear in mind that negative sign belongs to the 2. If you have to make any separation, bam, 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 that negative 2 belongs, that negative sign belongs to the 2. That's a D, and you can put an invisible and or a little light and negative 2C. That's what is actually going on there. It's a D and a negative 2C. Copy. Okay. To put things into perspective. Okay. Sometimes it may be useful to do that. So if you're doing a separation, that negative sign have to follow the 2. That's negative 2. So that's a D and negative 2C. Now multiplication comes before subtraction. You must multiply that 2, that negative 2, to this matrix first before you do anything. Okay, so bear that in mind. You are multiplying by a negative 2. A negative 2 you are multiplying by. Okay. Control V. Times. You are multiplying by a negative 2. Color code. Color code. Color code. Copy. Okay, so please bear that in mind. At first, that's what we have. All right, we had D minus 2C, and that's what it looks like. And you're watching it and you're wondering, well, what to do with that? Okay. To help you out, you can start to do some separation. That D is by itself, and that is negative 2C. Two terms are there, D and a negative 2C. And you know for sure, and anytime you see and, you can replace and with a plus, because in algebra, and plus is the same thing. So a plus can come there. So once you create a space, a blank spot, when you separate, you can input a plus sign and, because we must multiply by negative 2 first before we can do anything. Multiply each by negative 2. Okay, so we're multiplying by negative 2 to every element in the matrix. Multiply by negative 2. We are multiplying C by negative 2. Okay. So we have, and if you notice I replace the and with the plus, you can still put your and in if you want to. You can put your and, but just know it's a plus that there one time. You know? So you can do that. So what we're going to have, we're going to have a negative 1. We're going to have a positive 10. A negative times a negative is a positive. We're going to have negative 6. And we're going to have negative 16. Okay. So now this and now is technically a plus. All right. So what you are basically doing now, you are adding D to this. And they can be added because they are of the same size. They are both 2 by 2. When you multiply a matrix by a scalar, it does not change the size of the matrix. It just changes the size of the elements in the matrix, but the size of the matrix itself is unaltered. So
minus 2 times 1 is negative 1.
Minus 2 times 1 is negative 2. Thank you very much. Minus 2 times 1 is negative 2, negative 6, negative 18, and positive 10. So now we're going to have 5 plus negative 2. 5 subtract 2 is 3. 2 plus negative 6. That will give you negative 4. Corresponding elements is 0 and the 10. That will give you 10. And the negative 6 and the negative 16, a negative and a negative is a negative. So we have negative 22. So that's the answer. Okay. For part B. So